few weeks ago, typical, I woke up after the alarm, and I was thinking, great, today is Tuesday, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to the manufacturing floor, I'm going to run a few DOEs, I'm going to find the best material for this process. I'm like, oh, that's actually, what's the purpose of the whole thing? Also that I can get better results, and then I get a better focal review, and eventually I become a manager, and then I become a big person, and everybody thinks I'm the big important thing, and I get all my chemicals in my brain. That's not very convincing. What you want to do? Oh, because then I want to have kids, and I want my kids to go to Intel. I want them to be principal engineers, so they eventually everybody thinks they're the big thing, and then they get their own chemicals in their brain. This doesn't make any sense. What's the purpose of their whole life? And then I started thinking of the conclusion of my last speech, or one of the last ones, where I was quoting Jack Palance, if you might remember, when he was saying in the movie City Slickers, what's the purpose of life? And he said, there's one thing, and one thing only, which matters on this world. If you stick to this one thing, everything else means much. And everybody's like, what is it? This one thing is what you have to find out. And I was thinking, well, this doesn't really help me too much. And then I was like looking at the alarm, I'm like, okay, how do I find out what matters? And I'm like, okay, what about understanding who am I? What about understanding where I come from? So today I'm going to give you some thoughts on where I think we come from and what is my personal opinion on this. So let's look at let's look at the main theories, the main scientific theories which explain who we are and where we come from. And I think probably about 80 to 90% of the people here, at least in my opinion, probably believe these things. The first one is the theory of the Big Bang. And the other one is the theory of evolution. I suppose being in a scientific community, in an engineering world, we believe in those things. So the Big Bang. So somehow we had like a huge explosion in the middle of nowhere, about minus 4.7 billion years ago. And then time went on, and then somewhere here about this is 13.6 according to Wikipedia. And they're always right, okay? About minus 0.47 billion, then we had our little planet Earth. And then about 1 year later, there was some form of life starting in the form of bacterials or whatever. I'm not an expert in evolution, but that's when it started. And then it went on for another about 3 billion years. For the last 200,000 years, that's when we have humans that sort of look like us. So it's just a tiny portion of the whole thing, right? I know some of you, I can see some of you that really look like monkeys. I'm not going to look at them if I stare at any of you. But I don't think that proves anything. That's just a coincidence. So I'm not going to. And some of you are looking in the back. I know, you know who. So my point here is I see a lot of flaws with these ideas, but I'm going to list 3 of my favorite flaws on these 2 theories. You may agree, you might disagree, it's just my personal opinion. And I actually hope I'm completely wrong, because I get scared when I think of these things. The first one is, I guess the most obvious one. How did the explosion happen? I don't think I have to explain too much about this. I mean, this thing just exploding in the middle of nowhere out of no specific reason. Okay, so no explanation on this one, but doesn't really make much sense in my humble opinion. The second one, the problem of stability. So to make the point here, I'm going to tell you something. I have a PhD in controls. I don't mean to brag. I'm just establishing my credibility as a speaker. And if anything, there's nothing to brag. All I did was like spend 3 years running simulations in a computer and just pressing play the whole day, simulating. But I didn't learn anything on the whole PhD on those 3 years, but I learned actually one thing. The one thing is the concept of the feedback system, right? If you want to be able to control something to the right position, let's say there's a goal and I want to hit the ball, and hit it right there in the corner, there's 2 ways you can do this. Either you are Beckham, and you know exactly where to hit the ball, and you know the conditions of the air and the whole universe, and then when you hit the ball, it's going to go right here. Chances are you are not Beckham. I am not Beckham, so therefore What I would do as a control engineer, I would put some, when I hit the ball, I know I'm a regular soccer player, then I put a feedback loop system, some kind of sensor here, and then some type of actuator, so that eventually it hits the target, right? The concept of the feedback system. You see where the system is trying to go, you put a feedback loop, and then you adjust your control signal, and then you eventually want to do what you want to do. I don't see this happening that much in these two theories. Yes, you can argue evolution, survival of the fittest is some kind of a small, tiny feedback loop because it favors the ones that are more fit to live because of blah, 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 blah. But I think that's a tiny feedback system. It's just like a little tiny feedback system within the system. I don't see anything really happening here in the long term as far as evolution. Much less in the terms of the explosion. I mean, can you imagine any feedback system in the explosion? Yes, I mean, there's some gravity, some active forces, some things pulling the thing to it, but I don't see that much. So that's problem number 2. And the third problem, which I think is the most disturbing in my opinion, is that none of these theories really explain the most fundamental thing that exists, in my opinion, in nature, the most important, the most critical, the most exciting, which is consciousness. Consciousness. What is consciousness? In my opinion, consciousness is the ability to perceive and to make decisions. That last one, I'm not sure. It might be an illusion that you're making a decision, but at least I know for sure, because I feel it, that I can make decisions. That's not really explained by evolution, in my opinion. I've seen some explanation, but nothing that really makes sense to me. I don't think it's against evolution, it just doesn't support it. I can see the theory of evolution happening without really the need of consciousness. Now, when I look at all these things, and then I look at the recent trends in science, you know, Einstein saying something about time and space being relative, and then the quantum mechanics theory saying that the observation affects reality, then I think, what if instead of going this way, maybe there's a process, and I'm not implying anything, I'm not really religious or anything, because, and I'm not supposed to talk about it, but if something started with the end in mind, something that said, okay, let's start with the concept of consciousness, and then we make our way backwards. What else we need? A brain. Okay. We need also some body to support the brain. Then we need an ecosystem. We need a planet. We start going back and back. Then we need a solar system. We need gravity. And eventually we need something that sounds like this. In summary, some type of, maybe a feedback system here, which could be some type of God, or could be maybe the theory of the infinite universes. I don't know. But if somebody puts a gun to my face, I would say that this one makes more sense than this one. So at the end of the day, what do I end up with? I'm going to quote Einstein to conclude this by saying that if you can explain it, then you don't understand it. So next time I wake up in the middle of after the alarm, and I try to make sense of all these things, and I realize that this thing right here doesn't offer much explanation because I already spent a lot of time and I cannot find explanation, then there's another thing that I can look into it, which I hope and I think is going to give me the answer, and that thing is right here. Thank you.